Okay, guys, check this out. I got Joel with me. We're going to do a whole crap load of training. John is the guy that's paying us. Correct. So you are going to learn, it's going to be a long-ass video. If you want to endure, there's a lot to learn. I'm not going to tell you where all the little nuggets are. You're going to have to figure that out yourself. We're going to be talking about a whole lot of stuff. We're actually shooting this at the end of it. So we'll take a quick look because this is our arsenal of stuff. A rotary, all different. We got 2 different DA, actually 3. This is for my wet sanding. This is the new Boss. This is the Rupes. We've got my whole tool chest of polishes, compounds, buffer pads, sanding discs, tape. Go down the list. This is actually the finished product because there's going to be a lot of info in this video. You tested both the Griots and the Rupes, and you ended up choosing which one? The orange-red one? Yes, that's the Griots Boss 21. So they're both quality machines, but as a beginner, you liked that one because, what were you saying? It's a little bit heavier, but it has a bigger grip, better grip, so more ergonomically friendlier to your oversized hands, your ape-hanger hands, that probably knuckle draggers. Do you have calluses on your knuckles from dragging along the ground?
No, not yet.
Not yet, okay. Give it some time. But it was a little bit heavier, but you thought the power was better, right?
And I had a quicker...
Oh yes, there's no delay
on
the trigger. Yeah, that's my pet peeve with the Rupes. There's a little delay. How old are you, Joel?
17.
17? You're that young? Wow. All right. So Joel's 17. He works for
Exclusive Motors.
Exclusive Motors. Exclusive Motors is one of the very few dealerships that I actually do work for. And they have hired me to train Joel here in the art of buffer use, paint correction, call it whatever you want. Here we have the black Mercedes, and one of the reasons this machine is stigmatized and because it can produce a lot of friction. But if you know how to manage that friction and control it and you understand it, you can use it to your advantage. If you don't understand it, it can get away from you and cause damage. So burning an edge is literally that, where the edge or the seams of panels, or what's called character lines, that's what I call them. So there's a lot of stuff going on here. So the topography of this hood means that you have to apply certain pressure. So if there's an edge, if I have this polisher spinning at a high rate or whatever rate, it's instead of dissipating, how do I explain this? So for example, this pad is completely on the hood, and therefore all the friction is dissipated on the entire surface of this pad, correct? But let's say I take that edge, and now the edge, or the buffer, is only on the edge. All that friction is now concentrated right on that edge, correct? So therefore, it's a danger area, because now I'm just taking this much friction or this much surface area and I reduced it, and now I'm putting it on a single edge. So that is what happens is if I hold this there long enough, the friction will develop quicker and more significant on the edge, and therefore will burn it. And when I say burn it, I mean it will take the paint off of that edge. So that's what burning an edge is. So all these seams, all these areas are all problem areas as far as using this buffer or any buffer. They're just more of a problem with the high speed because it can get away from you quicker. But trust me, there's other trade-offs with a DA that are more dangerous, for lack of a better description, than this buffer. So for example, in this moment, I can sit here and dial this down. I can sit here and hold my hand against it. Put your hand against it. Now you control how hard you push it, and you can feel it heating up, right? So that's friction. So I'll show you on this DA with these foam pads that the friction is can actually be different and more significant in a worse way than this. So I could literally take this edge like this, it's not going to be that big of a deal. But with certain trim on a car, this polish or this pad specifically, and the fact that it's spinning on a single axis would actually make it safer than that polisher, which is kind of ironic for many people. They think, oh, the DA is the safest. It's like foolproof. Never mind, you have these emblems that you have to worry about. So if you're polishing on this and you're so focused on the surface, and that's a problem, is you become what's called hyper-focused. Okay, so I'm not going to teach you that. With all that said, we're not starting here. We are starting with one of these. Just so you know, this is the Rupe's 21, I think it's millimeter Bigfoot. So what this means is 21 millimeters. I think that's approximate. And what that has to do is how big, or this is what's called a throw. And here is the difference. Here, you hold that one. I also have my new Griot's Garage, and this is I believe, a Boss G21, which means it has a 21 millimeter throw also. So here are a couple of the big names in DA polishers. DA, I'm certain you don't know what that stands for. It stands for dual action. You know why it says dual action? Dual as in two. So what this does is it spins on an axis, plus it oscillates like this. Go for it. Okay, cheek you a little bit. Right, and that is dramatically better, by the way, what you just did there. So if I just suddenly stumbled in onto the moment, I'd look at you and think, oh, it looks like he's got some experience. I can tell he's a newbie still, but he looks like he's got some experience. Now, this is going to happen no matter what. The pad is not going to always be perfectly flat. And sometimes I know you're trying to do it intentionally, but sometimes I can tell that it's unintentional because you're just focused on other things. So you want to remember, based on the panel itself, so flat on this panel, see how the buffer is angled against the whole car right here? Flat is almost perpendicular to this car here now. So flat here is different than flat here, right? What we're really concerned with is flat against the actual panel. So flat, 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 but flat is going to be different here because now Darren, you need flat against, so I can have flat against this panel, which if you look at the top of this, like right here, that's not flat anymore. But you could argue that it's flat based on this curvature, right? But it's not. So that's what you have to be aware of. So flat here is more about this to this moment rather than this to this moment. Does that make sense? Take this off, the microfiber, the cloth, take it off of that. You can kind of expect your results and then just move forward. And I think at that point, anyhow, so this section to me for right now is likely done. When I use the term paint correction, what does that mean in your head?
The messed up, and you correct it.
Correct it. But see, that's kind of a simplification. It's a simplification for this because you have paint enhancement, paint correction, and really the difference is that you can enhance the paint so it looks better, but it's not necessarily permanent. Paint correction, if it's really corrected, that's a permanent. It would suggest that it's been done permanently, as in corrected permanently. Does that make sense? So that's where paint correction comes in, is that we actually want to correct the paint. So here, you come over here. I'm gonna dial this down until let's say 2. But first hold it up in the air. And what I want you to do is just turn it on without putting on the paint. Go ahead and turn it on. What I want you to do is really just get used to controlling it without being on the paint, that's all. So you can turn it off. Now the rule is that you want to keep the pad, the buffer, flat. That's the rule. Okay, so there's always rules and then there's always the exceptions to the rules. So based on once again, the nuances or the topography of the car will determine if you really can keep it flat. But sometimes, for example, right here, it's like, oh, if you kept that flat, even showing, if you kept this flat, do you think it's even going to touch in there? It's not. So if I just said, Joel, buff this car, you have to keep this perfectly flat on the entire car, you would literally miss spots of the car, correct? So therefore we have to break the rules. Turn it on. International. All right, I'm done. Okay, I'll come back in 3 hours and we'll see how far you've gotten. So not too bad, right? Okay. So let's do this because I was using this yesterday and so there's a little bit of polish on this. So really we're actually polishing this out. Polishing this with no polish on it. This is Shoal Concepts S20 Black. So I'm going to put a little on this. And this is what the industry calls seasoning the pad. So I'll just sit here and you can make lines in it. You can draw a little happy face, whatever. What essentially you're trying to do is disperse or dispense polish around this pad kind of evenly rather than just a big glob in the middle. When it comes to beginners, you guys will want to use way too much polish or compound. And do you know the difference between polish and compound?
Polish just makes it shiny and compound actually fixes it, right?
Yeah, that's good. And that's essentially what it is. The problem is it's one of those terms like polishers and buffers that people constantly interchange. And it's like, well, what are you really talking about? So as a rule, once again, the rule, compounds are more aggressive, have abrasives in them, and that's the first step. Polishing is so compounding does the fixing, it does the heavy lifting, let's call it that. Polishing does the final glossing, it's what produces a real gloss. But this is a one step, which means it has enough abrasives in it where it can do true paint correction, but at the same time as it polishes it to a nice high gloss. So with that said, go ahead and just start polishing. You've got some polish on it now, so go for it. So remember the rule was flat, right? You keep it flat as much as possible. And now at this point, you're probably thinking, well, how fast do I go? How hard do I push down, right? Well, that's where you and experience comes in, is you've got to figure out. Okay, go ahead and turn off. That's where only you can decide. Meaning I'm here with you and I can say, hey Joel, this paint is trash. We need to go heavy on it. But really, until you get behind the buffer and you start using it, you just don't know what that means. So that's where you have to do a little polishing, dial the speed where you think is appropriate, and it's really just a judgment call. It's like, oh, some expert out there would be like, oh dude, you've got to do it at number 5. It's like, okay, number 5 it is. Well, what if I came in and when you weren't looking, I dialed it down to number 4? Do you think you'd know? Probably not. Do you think the paint would know? Probably not. But if I dialed it down to 1 and you were used to doing it at 5, yeah, you'd be able to tell. Okay, so honestly, it's just a subjective call. So, but this is where you then take the polish off and you check for your results. So what I'll do is I will scrutinize or critique what I saw and observed. So for example, this would be the natural tendency, because you just lack experience, is to just kind of, do this type of thing. The problem is not much paint correction is going on if you do it like that. So you could actually do it like that and continue over this panel 50 times. Or you could spend a little more time per section. What you need to do is spend a little more time per section and just accept that. And I don't know if it's fear, like I don't know if there's a certain amount of fear that's going through your head where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm afraid to hold it here too long. So if I kind of keep it moving, therefore it's less chance that I'll damage the paint. Is that correct? Okay. But you also have to understand that you're not doing enough correcting, you're just enhancing it, but we want permanent results. What we really want is a combination of permanent and temporary results, because we're kind of trying to cut to the chase because of the application or the context, there's that word, which is dealer work. Their goal is to get this car sold and to make as much money as possible. It's that simple. They want it sold sooner rather than later. So that's where it's like, okay, they've got to balance all that, just like you're balancing all this. So I know that as a detailer and I'm working with a dealer, it's different than working with an end customer or the end owner. So you have to apply that understanding to the situation. So to kind of bring it back full circle is like you could go over this 50 times like this quickly and you'll get some results, but you need to spend a little more time. Now right now, I'm trying to hold that line, but you can tell I'm going above it. Like it's impossible to hold that perfectly straight. That's really not a huge concern. What I'm trying to do is hold that line the best that I can, which is this character line, which is difficult for it to show up on that camera. But I'm trying to hold that character line so that, like I said, I can come to the middle. So up here, I'm going to hold that character line again. Now, in case you're wondering, when I was here on Wednesday, I officially already polished down this area. So I know in this moment I can go quicker over that. But everything from here down needs to be addressed. So that's why I moved a little quicker through that. So I maintain the pressure here, and then at the end, maybe I'll finish it off like that. You see, and that the goal is, or my thinking is that I'm essentially blending the two areas together, even though I came up to that line and actually crossed over that line each time. So, and then as far as pressure, put your hand up. I want to show you, that's about how much pressure I'm putting against it. So you do it in reverse. Like would you say, how much pressure are you putting against it? Probably that, that's what I thought. So you can put more like that. And if you really need, that would probably be overkill, because then it would probably seize that up. So that's where you have to kind of balance, but the pressure that you're putting is safe, but we want also effective. We want to be safe and effective. So you need to apply a little more pressure, spend a little more time, rather than, doing all this stuff. So you really, you seriously have to dissect it. It's like, okay, I'm going to make sure I spend enough time, and I'm really going to focus on this area. But you don't become so hyper-focused that you forget about the edges of this, or the character line here, the character line here. But you want to make sure this section is done. And then you want to make sure this section is done. And this section is done. So you need to spend the time necessary to get each one of those sections done properly. Then as you're working, you're going to kind of blend it in naturally anyways. And then at the very, very end, if you want to, you can just kind of go over it lightly and just kind of finesse it at the very end if you wanted to. You'll develop, if you do enough of this, you'll develop your own, your own rhythm. I was like, rhythm. Yes, even white.
There was once a day that I would pray for you. I'd go and misbehave just so you'd notice too. Sneaking looks up and down from across the room. And damn, what a